Well, hey, friends, welcome to another clinical entrepreneur episode where we are talking about all things building your business, your wellness practice, especially your cash based wellness practice, and tossing in a little clinical now and again, because if we didn't have the clinical, we wouldn't have the business to run, right? But the business is the foundation. And that's what I want to teach you how to grow, how to scale, and how to become more profitable in your own practice. Today, I have a special guest, and he has been on the podcast before. And he's just one of my favorite people because I probably say that about everybody, but I like everybody. He's one of my favorite people because he was the person who was really instrumental for me in beginning to look at systems, having systems in my business in a different way. And before I would get into the episode, I want to give you just kind of a little bit of my backstory. If you couldn't tell by now, I am one of those people that you probably shouldn't tell me what not to do. Like, I don't say that in an unkind way, but like the fastest way to get me motivated is to tell me that I can't do something because I will go figure it out. You hide and watch. I will figure it out. I'm just that, I don't know. It's just how I am. I'm blessed that way. I don't know. Maybe it's a curse. I don't know. Anyway, when I heard people were talking about systems in the business, and I thought, "Oh, I'm not gonna have anything that's gonna, like, box me in. I don't want a business that's run by systems. I don't wanna have, like, rules I have to follow." Do you see where I'm getting with this? I looked at it that way as something that was I had to follow it. I had to, like, stand in line. I had to be in order. I had to be like everybody else. I had to do the thing exactly. And so, really honestly, full transparency, I resisted it for a long time, really long time. I just said, no, the business, we're going to be fluid. We're just going to go with the flow. We're going to like work with people, love on people, do the things that we as practitioners love to do. And I found myself that that didn't work out so well because I was the one that was the weak link. I was the one that everybody was coming to. Well, what do you want to do about this? Well, what about this? Is this okay? What do you think about? And then couldn't get anything done because then I became the bottleneck. So about around that time, maybe within 6 months or a year, when I was really just frustrated with this whole thing, I came across a book called Systemology, and it was about building systems for business. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it another try. Someone recommended it to me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to read it again. And the author, David Jenyns, who's my guest today on the podcast, he is the one that literally opened my eyes as a really small business, even that the systems were what was going to give me freedom in the business because it didn't provide rules, which is how I was thinking about it, but it didn't provide rules as much as it provided a framework. And the framework creates safety. And one of my favorite examples to use is like guardrails on a bridge. If you have a bridge and this bridge is going across the Grand Canyon, it's deep and long, and you're never going to survive a fall. If you have guardrails, you are very happy being right over next to the guardrail on your side of the road. No problem because the guardrail is there. It just provides a framework. It provides a safety barrier within which then as a business, the business can operate within the guidelines or the guardrails of any particular function in the business. And I found that that actually gave me so much it was like, okay, I've got guardrails up now. Now I have a system that we still have room to adapt within the system, but the system actually gives me freedom and then I don't have to think about it anymore. It was genius. So, my guest today is David Jenyns. But today, yes, we're going to be talking about systems, but we're also going to sneak peek and talk a little bit about AI. Spoiler alert. So, here's my episode interview with David Jenyns. Well, hello and welcome, David. I'm so glad you're here on the podcast again. I think, is this the second or the third time that we've chatted?
Good question. I think it might be the second. Maybe I've got that wrong. Either way, though, it's just good to see
What
you
did
again.
I don't know. It's so good to see you too. I am a system lover and you are my system hero. So there we go. We were just talking kind of offline that we have been head down dedicated to getting systems in place. And I think that, once you realize that the systems are what bring the freedom, then you are hooked to the freedom.
Yes.
I want the freedom more than I want the pain of, I'll say pain in quotes, but like, the work involved in creating the system. So I'm so excited about our conversation today because we are going to talk about how to make system creation even easier using AI. Yes?
Yes. Yep. A lot
Awesome.
has changed.
So I'm just going to start there. Like how you
Yeah.
started, you have a book. You started with a book about writing about systems, which is where I really fell in love with them, your book. And then you've now added on AI into this
Mm,
process of creating systems. Is that correct?
yeah. It was pretty breakthrough, I think, for a lot of business owners when you have that chat GPT moment when you used it the first couple of times and you thought, wow, what it's pushing out here is extraordinary and it's tailored to what I need and what I am asking for. And then you start to think, how might I use this in my business? And I think a lot of people with AI initially they chase shiny objects and they
Yeah.
think, oh,
Yeah.
this AI tool can create 1,000 cat videos of them holding up my logo and then it can put it onto all of my social media. And
Yeah.
just because it can doesn't mean you should. And it's really about using AI to take what you're already doing and then do it faster, cheaper, and better. Because if you
Nice.
approach
Yeah.
it from that standpoint, it automatically drops straight to your bottom line because they're already core tasks. So that's where I start to see this real intertwine between process and AI because you need to get very clear on, well, what are the core processes in your business? What does make your business tick to deliver those outcomes for clients? And then we can then start to say, and how can we leverage AI to make that happen even easier? And I
Right.
think where we're going, I kind of see the writing on the wall, which is these AI agents are getting smarter. And I see the SOPs and processes and systems that you document today, they'll end up becoming the programming of the machines tomorrow. And
Mhm.
as these AI agents get smarter, you will be using your processes to say, hey, AI agent, I want you to go do this thing for me, draft it up, follow my SOP, and then come back to me and I'll review it once it's done. So I can see how important process is going to become. So that
Yeah.
right there is probably a really big insight and why I've doubled down on it.
So tell me from a practical standpoint, my audience, the listeners are wellness or healthcare practitioners. So that's the space that we're in. And so many of these practitioners are, we've talked about this before, they're just solo. They maybe
Yep.
have a part-time person, but they're working on their own. And so what happens in a business, this, when we start working on our own, then we're doing all the things. We are being the plumber and we're the fixer of the building and we're the marketing
Yep.
person. It's the e-myth revisited all over again, right? So the thought of creating systems is just like one thing that gets added to the to-do list. Like, I need to do this, but we don't have time to do it. So leveraging AI to help create some of those initial systems is a wonderful,
Yeah.
amazing idea. But where would you advise? And I remember asking you this question the last time we talked, but in starting with someone, if you said, what are the systems that I can use AI to create that will help me get a little more freedom in the business? Because it's time, right? It's time that we're fighting against. A practitioner, you, me, we are limited by time. So, what are the systems that you think foundationally could give some space in the business? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
What would you
So
say?
I've done a lot of thinking about this because people have different ideas. Oh, yes, do things that take a lot of time, do things that don't take a lot of time and are easy, do things that buy back your time, do things that are very complex. Like, I always come back to this one idea though. Really, that you want to ask the question, how does the business make money? And just focus in there. Think about who your dream client is and the primary product or service that you would sell to that person first and systemize everything around that. How do
Hmm.
you attract those people into your business? How do you handle the inquiries? How do you sell them or book them for that appointment?
Right.
How do you deliver and how do you get them to come back? Now, if you think there first, the next question to ask is where within what I call the critical client flow is the pain? Like, as that solo practitioner, where do you find you have the most trouble? And is it something, oh, it's chasing up clients when they haven't paid? That's something that's a pain point that chews up a lot of your time. And
Yeah.
okay, well, that might be a good place to start because the system ends up being the bridge to ultimately getting someone to do it or to do it more efficiently. And I think that first hire, even if you're solo, everybody I think should be thinking about getting at least a part-time offshore virtual assistant. I say that so that way it can be, very accessible from a cost perspective, just to
Correct.
build up the habits of offshoring work or outsourcing or getting someone to take some of that administrative work off your plate, because most of the practitioners, they're going to make most of the money in when they're meeting, working with the
That's right.
client,
Yep,
not
exactly.
booking appointments, chasing up things
Right.
like all of that administrative work or posting on social media. Like there's a truckload of administrative work that could very easily go to an assistant.
Then let's take that concept because that is a really big pain point. You're absolutely right. So, how do we use AI then specifically to put the practitioner in a place where they can develop the system around the delegation? Because
Yeah.
if we don't delegate well, it's like input to ChatGPT. If your input isn't
Yeah.
good, your output isn't going to be good. Same thing when we delegate. If we don't delegate with clarity, then what we get back is going to be disappointing. And it's because we didn't set it up correctly. So, what would your recommendations there be?
So previously, this used to be worth it when you would actually record a video, watch it, pull out the key steps, and do it manually. So now that we can use AI, it's a no-brainer. The first step is to just record yourself doing the thing. So whatever the task is that we're talking about, if it's on the screen, you might use Loom or Zoom or some sort of screen recording. If it's in the actual practice, maybe it's on your iPhone
Right,
or on some sort of GoPro or just something, you need to record that task being done and just talk over the top as you're doing it, or talk through you doing the task, explaining what you're thinking and what you're doing in the moment. The brilliant thing here is once that's recorded, a lot of these platforms like Loom now have transcriptions built in. So
right.
then you just get the transcription from the video, you go to ChatGPT and you say, I would like you to draft a process for me, pick out the key steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and etc. And I'm going to post the transcript from a video of me walking through that task. And then you post the transcript, and then it will draft version number 1. Now, you might even say, can you create me a little checklist that I can check off as I do it, or slight variations on it? But it's so much easier to get a fantastic first draft. And then, as long as you've got a central place to store all of this knowledge, you just want to make sure that you have a way to organize it. So when you do bring on an assistant, it's easy to find and everything's in one place. But
Right.
it really is quite extraordinary how quickly you can get to first draft.
So, first draft comes back and we look at it and we say, yeah, it's pretty good. It's not bad. Like maybe there's a few little tweaks, et cetera. We've copied, pasted, put it in a Word document. We're kind of massaging it and getting it right. So, then storing the systems in an organized way is always the pain point, right? That's like, where
Yep.
did they get lost? We put them in Dropbox and it's in a Google folder, and then it maybe is on a folder on your desktop. There's an organized way to be able to do that. So, what would your recommendation be if someone was not going to use software? And I want to talk about that in a minute. But if someone
Yep.
was not going to use software, what is your recommendation for keeping those organized and also thinking through the lens of, this might be something I can delegate?
Yeah. So you do want to have some sort of naming structure and folder structure, and something that makes it possible for someone to have a shot at finding something if they need it. So generally, if I was going to advise someone, I'd say, firstly, think about creating, let's say you were going to do it in a folder on SharePoint or Dropbox or Google Drive. Start off by creating the folder structure, which might be admin, sales, marketing, HR, finance. Even though it might just be you, dream big and imagine
Yes,
your organization where you do have someone else wearing those hats and taking
right.
on those responsibilities, and start to organize that way. And you get those folders set up, and initially you can just save things into your folders based on the department. As that grows over time, because even those folders can get out of control, You then might create some subfolders where, I don't know, under finance, you might have a subfolder of invoicing or bad debtors, and you start to then group relevant systems together and the videos related to those. You also want to think in terms of, we see, Google Drive folder get very quickly out of hand. The,
Oh
the
boy.
biggest thing is you need to think about naming conventions. So you want to make sure that the title of that item says what it does on the tin. As in, if it's follow up bad debtors, then that's what it says in the document. And you also need to watch out for like version control, as in,
Oh, so true.
it's the worst if you update a process, but you create a new one. And now before you know it, you've got 4 different versions and you don't know which is the real one or the most current.
Correct.
So yeah, you do have to be a little bit more particular if you're just using folders, because there's a couple of other things that can be a bit of pain points. Just making sure that the systems are formatted in a similar way. Like if they're just Word docs, then it's very easy not to have some sort of structure. But it's a great starting point, especially if you're a solopreneur. Just start off, create the folder structure, and start to record little videos of you doing the different tasks in your business as you're doing it. That should be version number 1. And then maybe the job for that administrative assistant, the first job would be, great. Now I want you to watch those videos, run them through ChatGPT, and create me little processes.
There
And
you go. Yep.
when you watch that, then I also want you, Mr. or Mrs. Assistant, to watch out for the tasks that you think you could do. And you let me know. And then that might be a great way, as they're documenting, for them to say, you know what, I think I could do that next time. I can book that calendar appointment for you and chase up the client and remind them that their appointment is next Monday. And then that's how that process of slowly taking things off your plate so that you can work on higher value tasks.
That's such a great idea. I love that. I never really thought about that, putting it in the hands of the VA to say, create the system for me, because I think that's where initially for us and myself, that was the overwhelming part. Like, how do I even put this together? And what are the sections of the system? Definitions of the terms, like that's some more advanced stuff. But that part got really overwhelming. I never thought about that. Such a good idea to like ask the VA to not only create the system, but then ask them what they would be able to do, what they could take off.
Yes.
Such a great idea. So, one of the things that I found out as a result of reading your book was that you have software that actually does this work for you and organizes all the things. So, way back when, I think your software was probably pretty brand new. It was fairly early on. And I thought, okay, I'm doing it. And the cost was reasonable. And it was a year, paid for a year. And we just started slowly plugging in the systems. And to your point, I loved the fact that there was review dates, like a place where you
Yeah.
could put last edited. And then you could assign it to someone and you can gate them so only certain people see certain things. So talk a little bit about why you created the software. And I'm a big fan, by the way. Can't tell.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, look, I just created it much like I wrote the book, which was to scratch my own itch. I wrote the book Systemology because it was the book I wish I had when I started systemizing. I developed the software because we were using Dropbox and things were getting out of control. And there was a handful of things where I said, look, I've recognized that systems and processes are the most important asset in business because, you know, the other one sometimes people say is, yeah, but what about your staff? And then I'm like, yeah, but you don't own your staff. It's not an
Right.
asset that you own because they could leave. And when they
Yep.
leave, they're going to walk out the door with all of that knowledge in their head. So you have to get it out of their head. You have to get it centrally organized and stored. And I thought, well, I want to give these systems and processes the respect they deserve. And so I started to develop a place to organize and sort and make sure that it was easy to add all of the different media, like quickly embed a video into the
Yes.
process or add additional PDFs, just so that way there's always a single source of truth. And then the more that I've done this, I've realized the secret is to then make sure you're never more than one click away from the how-to document when you or your assistant is doing the task. So
Yes.
sometimes that means creating a QR code and sticking it next to the light switch in your practice, and you scan it on your phone and it jumps you straight to the end of day routine. Or it's a link in a calendar appointment that, hey, here is the link to the way that this particular client protocol is going to run. Or if it's in project management, or if you're working with an assistant, you always just never more than one click away, because what that does is it removes the biggest excuse that a lot of team members might have for not following a process is, yeah, but I didn't know. Or if they didn't do something
Yeah.
to a certain expectation, well, I didn't know you wanted it done that way. I didn't know that that was a step. And if you can remove that, it makes it much easier to manage team members, because you just go, when you do this thing, I don't care if you've got the system open or not, if you're doing it perfectly. But if you're
Right.
not doing it perfectly, my expectation is that you'll open the process and follow it until you know the way that I want it done.
And that puts the onus on the staff person or the VA or whoever it is, not on me. I'm not the one that has to be the bad guy, so to speak.
Yeah,
I can
it's the
say, listen,
system.
here it is. This is the system. All you have to do is follow it. One of the things that I always like to do is if you have something in the business that's breaking, it's a really easy process to just ask yourself if something's going and you don't like the way it's going, you just ask yourself, is there a system for this process?
Yes.
Very often, so often, the answer is no. So that means that if there's no system, how can I expect that employee is going to follow that system if there isn't one? So then that's my first question. Is there a system? No. Okay. If not, then I need to write the system, because the system then creates safety and security and guardrails for the employee and for
Yes.
me, because now I know that I now have something to measure the successful relationship that I have or don't have with an employee. And if they
Yeah.
continue to follow the system, then that means I've written a good system and the employee is able to follow the system. But if I have a system, the employee is not following it, now that gives me a benchmark or a guide to be able to have a conversation with them that's concrete. Here's the system.
Yes.
You didn't do it. How can we make this better? What can we do? So I love that.
I love it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So
It's
good.
such a strong position to come from. And the reality is, your staff members and A players, they love this sort of thing. As in, your greatest team members want to know how to succeed and what success looks like. Oftentimes, team members, they can feel like they're flying blind, or
Right.
they have to be some sort of mind reader, which doesn't put them in a great place. It's actually, a lot of A players really appreciate and respect a process because it sets clear expectations for them and it shows them how to win.
Yep.
So sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect there, because the business owner sometimes, and you're probably the exception rather than the rule, a lot of business owners don't see themselves as systems people, and they don't like creating systems, and they might even actively avoid it. And they
Mhm.
think, oh, I'm creative and, I just get to it. I solve problems, which is fine to get the business up to a certain level. But you've got to understand, by that mentality, it will also trap you. So
Right.
at some point, you are going to have someone step in. You're going to have to step back if you want to grow something that isn't, like Michael Gerber always says, if your business depends on you, you don't have a business, you have a job.
So true. So true. Because then the employees are coming to you saying, what do I do about this? And well, what's the answer to this? And how do you want this to happen? And is this copy okay? Or is this social post okay? If there's a
Yes.
system and a process, then I'm out. If this social posts meet these criteria, then we're good. And I still get caught in this trap. Sometimes I think I don't think I know. I'm way too involved still, even though we have well over 1,000 systems, but
Yes.
I'm still way too involved because it's just such a process, but we've been working on it for a number of years. So it takes time. It just takes time.
Yeah,
So
and it's hard to break habits, because it's all of the habits and the actions that have actually brought success and helped you to build the business up to this size, then end up being the habits and behaviors that hold you back from growing through to the next level. So it's very hard for business owners to let go. And again, quite often it's the trap where you get caught in the business. And again, to quote Michael E. Gerber, he talks a lot about the technician, and a lot of clinicians and people who run practices, because they know how to do the technical work, as in they're meeting with the patients, then that holds them doing that work. To grow a business that delivers the technical work requires different skills, and there are other things that you need to work on. And that's the E myth. Like, it's the entrepreneurial myth that because you can do the technical work, you think you can run the business that does the technical work, when sometimes that can actually be more of a curse than a blessing.
Yeah.
Because, like, I actually think sometimes if you don't know how to do the work, it's even better as a business owner, because you can't slip into, oh, I'll just do it. I'll fix that problem because you know how. So a lot of this depends on what type of business the practice owner wants to build.
Yeah. And building that business, some of them are really, really happy just being a solopreneur and
Yeah.
keeping everything done and doing it all by hand. And they're small enough. But even that small solo practitioner is going to be wasting time chasing your tail because something got dropped, and it got dropped because there was no system to make sure
Yeah.
that thing came up again. So things like Asana, those like project
Yeah.
management tools, that is built into our system culture. So
Yes.
system might get finished, and then the end step of the system is add to Asana or create an Asana template or whatever it is, and then it ties it to the next series of actions that has to happen. But once that system is written, then all we do is just follow the system, and then
Yes.
thing gets dropped ever. And so it's even, I think maybe it's just as relevant, if not even more relevant, for the solo practitioner who truly doesn't have any desire to outsource.
I agree, because I think even if you want to stay small, even if you just want to be solo, then you should be optimizing for spending the most amount of time you can meeting with clients, because
Making
that
money.
is the highest value activity. You
Yep.
should at least have an assistant who is doing all of the busy work or the administrative work, so that you can spend your time and the client then gets a great experience, because it's not just about when they meet you in the room, it's also what happens before and after and how you follow up. And that whole experience is the client's experience with you. And you want to make sure that runs smoothly and like
Every
clockwork.
time. Yep. So for instance, it could even be things like that follow-up email. After the appointment is over, maybe you have a series of 3 or 4 emails in an automation, and that patient just gets an email that just says, "It was really nice to see you today. Thanks so much. And I've got you confirmed for the blank date in the future," or "Here's a link to order your supplements," or whatever it might be. But
Yep.
those things can be automated. They don't have to be, the practitioner has to sit down at the computer and type out 5 emails at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything you do more than once needs a system.
I love it. That might
That's
be the quote for the
That's
episode.
my philosophy. Anything that you do more than once needs a system, even if it's just twice a year. Like, I have a system for like paying my property taxes.
Yep.
So I don't have to ever think about like, okay, I got to remember that date. I got to remember that date. It's just a system. This is how we do it. So
Yes.
I'm a big fan.
I think the other thing I would say is, I don't think for a lot of business owners, I've ever not have them agree that systems driven business doesn't deliver better outcomes for clients, for you, for the bottom line, for the suppliers, really anyone that you interact with. Systems driven businesses will get a better result. So if we agree that that is true and correct, then the next thing is, well, if you're not a systems person, and I know you're the exception to the rule, but a lot of business owners aren't,
Yeah.
I'm going to say, if you're not a systems person, then I'm going to suggest that that assistant that you get, make sure that they are super strong, because it's okay if you're not, as long as they complement where you're weak. Get someone who is extraordinary with systems. And if
Yeah.
they bring that and help to organize you and create that experience, then that's going to be a tremendous win. Just because you might not see yourself as systemized doesn't mean you can't own a systemized business. You just need to get a systemized person on your team.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is email. Email and inbox for a practitioner can be really overwhelming because business email for your personal stuff, it ends up kind of getting all turned and mixed in together. And then in the middle of all that, you've got patient emails that are coming through. Someone says, "Oh, I need help with this," or "Can you check on this?" or "I didn't get my order," or "When I need to reschedule," or whatever. And then they get lost in there. But when you have that assistant that's strong in those organizational systems type skills, they actually can take your inbox and they will make sure that all of those emails that you need to see go into another folder that you only have to look at. Like just that little thing there
Yeah.
could save, 15, 20 minutes out of the day. And that's 2 hours a week that you got back
Yeah.
into your life. And it's just that one little thing. So sometimes it doesn't have to be a big, we have to systematize all of it. You just pick
Yeah.
one
And
thing. And if email is the pain point, which is what you started it by saying is if email is the pain point and you're losing things and you can't keep up, then you
yep.
hire someone to help you manage the email.
The good thing is that systems have a compounding effect. So
Yeah.
that's why sometimes you might not notice the impact immediately. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, a little bit more efficient there, a little bit errors there. But if you move 6, 12 months into the future of consistently chipping away and getting all of these little wins, they stack on top of each other. And there is a point at which it's almost like a hockey stick with regards to that growth curve and the impact that it has. And there's a moment when you'll go, wow, I can't imagine doing business any other way. And you can't then go back.
Yes, that is so true. I cannot imagine where we would be today if we did not have these. Like, I think if I said to my team, okay, we're going to like get rid of all the systems, I think they'd probably all quit
Yep.
because it's so much security for them and those systems save them time too. So by pulling those out and not having those efficient systems, they end up not having as much time to be able to work on the things that they want to. So yeah, you and me. What did I
That's
say
right.
before we got
Preaching
on
to the
here? I said,
converted.
yes,
Yeah.
I know. I said, I love them and you are my system superhero. So we make a really good team together. So I want to make sure that people know about two things. One is your software. I have been a huge, big fan, and I would love for them to know where they might be able to get it or look at it.
Yes.
As you start creating these systems, you certainly can put them in, as you mentioned, Dropbox or Google or whatever. But at some point, you are going to need a little bit more organization to the whole thing,
Yes.
especially if you're going to be delegating and hiring someone that can help you build out those systems even more. So tell us where we might be able to find that software.
Best place is just to head to systemhub.com. And timing wise, it's actually really good. We are right in the middle of rebuilding the software and we'll be launching something towards the end of first quarter next year. And it's going to be snappier. It's still going to have all of the same sort of functionality and we'll be able to migrate users over, but we're going to be able to add in a whole bunch of extra AI thinking. And a lot of the systemology will be built into the platform. So it's, yeah, a great place. And we have a little nice and easy plan for small teams to get started, very cost effective, and it can grow and scale with you. I think just understanding and appreciate the value of systems and going to work on them, because regardless of what business you work on, the systems can always come with you. Like even if you sold your business or you started up a new business or you're changed, like you're just developing best practice, and every business needs to get clients. Every business needs to sell them. Every business needs to onboard them, and they need finance systems and how do you recruit team members? Like there's a lot of similarities from business to business. And a lot of your business is probably a lot closer to other businesses than you realize, especially, I mean, you're all in Rhonda's world and you're all working on your practice, and there are going to be some similarities there. So I'd even suggest when you sign up to System Hub, try and get a little mastermind together and as a group kind of work
Wow.
and develop and improve these systems, because it'll be, yeah, a huge difference for you.
Yeah, so systemhub.com, and it's the software that we use. So we have been using it for years and we love it. We would not want to move. There's several system softwares out there and they all have pros and cons in one way or the other. But when we looked, we loved yours the most. And so that's why we went with it. So thank you for creating such a wonderful thing. It has saved us so much time. We can go in, search for it, and it just pops right up. That's why the naming conventions are so important. So you
Yes.
have to name the system what the result is. What is it going to do? What is the outcome of the system? because otherwise we've gotten into trouble with that, where someone had a creative name for something and the rest of us didn't know what the creative name
Yeah.
was. We're like, where is that thing? So yeah,
Yes.
lesson learned that way. And before I let you go too, I want to just say thank you. You made a very generous offer for me and for my audience, and that is you have offered everyone a free copy of your book, which is so nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Coming into Christmas, depending on when you listen to this episode, it's a little bit of a Christmas gift. I ended up having a partner who was probably a little bit keen, and we over ordered a bunch of books. So I've got a bunch of books sitting in my warehouse in the US and Australia. So I picked out a couple of partners where I thought, you know what? Let's just get the book into the hands of business owners just to get you started on the journey. So the book's Systemology, and no doubt, Rhonda, you'll have a link so that way people can jump straight
Yep.
to it. Depending on when someone gets it, you'll get a book, like a real one, a physical
Real
one
book.
mailed out to
Yes.
you. If
Yes.
you're in the US or you're in Australia, and if you're outside of those areas, then we can arrange a digital copy as well.
Yep. Well, we already have the link all set up. So for those of you that are listening or watching, you can go to the show notes or click in the link below the video, and we will have the link there for you to be able to click and get a free copy of the book. But it was so generous of you to do that. I was so thankful. Made my heart very happy because I'm so passionate about this. It's such an important part of growing and scaling a very successful business is making sure that it's efficient. And it's the one of the efficiency and streamline are the words that I hear often from practitioners. It's one of the top 3 things that they say, "I want a streamlined business." And you can't have a streamlined business without having systems in your business. You can't.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
no way. They're almost 2 terms that are like interchangeable, right? You can't have one without the other. So that's why I am just so incredibly passionate about this. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast with me.
An absolute pleasure. Always a blast.
So people can find you at systemology.com. Yes. Software is at systemhub.com. And you also have a wildly crazy, and what did I say? Screaming? Yes.
Yes.
A screamingly amazing YouTube channel where you can find David as well. And that is Systemology. So just search YouTube for Systemology. Is that right?
It's actually under the System Hub. So if you
Oh,
do, I think it's
System Hub.
youtube.com/system hub.
This Hub,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, got it. So System Hub is where you find on YouTube, but yeah, the videos are great. There's some conversational ones, there's some short ones, some long ones, some interviews, lots to listen to. So get on David's mailing list, and then you will get all the front row seat to all things systems, but this is the man that we all need to be learning from. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Right,
My
take
pleasure.
care. So, are you super inspired now? Do you want to start using a little bit more AI? I'm telling you to create these systems using AI and all the other things that you can do in your business with it. Like it or not, it's not going anywhere. Secretly, I kind of hope that there's some maybe rules, or here I am saying rules after what I said in the beginning. But I'm secretly kind of hoping that they're going to rein it in a little bit. But AI, here's what I have to say. I kind of pushed back on it a little bit in the beginning because I don't like the concept, really, but I also know that it's what's gonna make everyone else go further faster, and if I don't get on that train at the level that I'm comfortable with, then everybody's gonna outpace me. Like, it's kinda like when things went from paper to digital, right? We had paper calendars, paper schedulers. Back in the day, it was all on paper, and then everything started to move to digital. People that didn't move to digital couldn't keep up because the digital was moving faster, right? It was allowing more freedom. Same thing with AI. So I really would encourage you to lean in and go check out the show notes, because there is a link in the show notes. You've got to go to the show notes, and we'll link them in an email. Check your email if you're on my list. If you're not on my list and you want to join, you can go to rondanelson.com/join. Super easy. Get on my list and then you'll get the information as well. But there is a download, and David has generously given us some of his books, and you can have one for free. No questions, no problem. So go to rondanelson.com and go to podcasts. You're going to find the show notes for this episode with David Jenyns. And then you'll be able to click there, fill out your information, and they will ship you the book absolutely free. So there you go, friends. Have an awesome week. Take care, and I will see you next week on the podcast.